Mainland health officials explain quarantine relaxation announced yesterday. Pediatrician warns of a possible tridemic in winter. And the leaders of China, Japan and Korea join ASEAN summit. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The mainland reported 11,803 new COVID cases today, racking up more than 10,000 daily cases for the second consecutive day, with infections in Guangzhou alone accounting for more than 3,000 cases. Meanwhile, mainland health officials explained the rationale behind the relaxation of some anti-COVID measures announced yesterday. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Though the pandemic situation seems to be worsening in the mainland, the National Health Commission yesterday announced a series of measures that outline Beijing's updated plan to combat the virus. One major adjustment is reducing the number of days inbound travelers will need to undergo quarantine in centralized quarantine facilities. The quarantine period is now 5 days instead of 7, while visitors will still need to quarantine for 3 days at home. The move is seen as a major adjustment in one of the world's strictest COVID jurisdictions. However, Lei Hai-Chao, deputy head of the National Health Commission, stressed that the adjustment was not an attempt at relaxation, but a decision based on scientific evidence. Mainland health officials also said they would not exclude the possibility of further refining quarantine measures based on future mutations of the virus. Meanwhile, Guangzhou City continues to reel from its recent increase of COVID case counts, as the city accounted for over 90% of all infections in Guangdong province. The southern Chinese province reported 3,756 cases, with more than 400 previously asymptomatic patients now confirmed with the virus. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 5,732 new COVID cases today. That's around 100 cases more than yesterday's tally. The city also reported its first case containing the BF.7 variant. Local infections accounted for 5,331 cases, while 392 were imported cases. 22 residents and 3 staff members from 10 care homes for the elderly and disabled tested positive for the virus. Clusters were reported from 10 schools. 73 COVID patients suffering from severe symptoms remain in hospital, while another 6 COVID patients died. The fifth wave has claimed the lives of 10,304 people so far. Executive councillors Jeffrey Lam and Tommy Chung believe the relaxation of quarantine rules for those travelling to the mainland can help boost the city's economy. They're also urging the SAR government to step up efforts to explain the differences between the restrictions on the mainland and Hong Kong.
On Friday, the mainland announced it was shortening quarantine time for inbound travellers to 5+3, meaning 5 days of quarantine at designated sites plus 3 days health monitoring at home. Speaking on a radio program, EXCO member Jeffrey Lam, who's also a lawmaker, thinks the move is one step closer to further relaxation of quarantine rules on the mainland. Lam thinks that may even help increase the number of Hong Kong people allowed to get into the mainland each day. Still, he said the number of flights in and out of Hong Kong is not enough and hopes it will return to half its pre-COVID numbers. Meanwhile, catering sector lawmaker Tommy Chung thinks the SAR government has to step up explanatory work on quarantine arrangements in Hong Kong as distinct from the mainland to other parts of the world.
Our 0+3 and China's 5+3, the 3 is completely different. If you just use numbers and not explaining, in fact, our 3 is not a quarantine. In fact, you could travel all around the place, except you just can't go to the scheduled premises, like restaurants and bars. So we need to do more explaining overseas. We were thinking about doing promotional clips and put it on airline coming into Hong Kong to tell them what they need to do, 0+3, to explain to them so that they will know actually when they come in, and not to think that everybody will know what it is. We're trying to help the government or push the government to do more explanation overseas.
Chung added the gradual relaxation of restrictions in both Hong Kong and the mainland will benefit the city's economy.
Ahead of the peak season of winter flu, a pediatrician called on parents to get their children vaccinated in preparation for a possible tridemic. Dr. Patrick Ip, Clinical Associate Professor of the Department of Pediatrics in the University of Hong Kong, said kids will be exposed to different types of viruses in winter, especially as anti-epidemic rules have been eased. He warned that a phenomenon called the tridemic has emerged in Western countries, and pandemic involving flu, COVID and respiratory syncytial virus, which overwhelmed many medical systems worldwide. The pediatrician added the low vaccination rate for the baby version of BioNTech, now available in the city, is worrying. In Cambodia, leaders of China, Japan and South Korea held talks with Association of Southeast Asian Nations leaders today during its summit. The theme of the leaders' opening statements was the need to cooperate to overcome current challenges. Tracy Furness reports.
In the second day of the ASEAN summit, Premier Li Keqiang, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed leaders of the ASEAN countries in Phnom Penh. Li said that East Asian countries need to strengthen cooperation to promote economic development and maintain the security and stability of international supply chains. Strengthening cooperation between us will not only promote the economic and social development of our countries, but also help maintain the security and stability of the international chain and supply chain, Li said. The Japanese Prime Minister said he would like to advance initiatives in new fields such as the digital economy and resilient agriculture. And South Korean President talked about overcoming challenges such as food and energy crises that were causing climate change and which is now worsening because of the prolonged war. He also addressed the challenges of food security, saying ASEAN plus 3 countries will be able to meet the challenges and provide new impetus to the global economy. Li Keqiang and Kishida held a brief meeting on the summit's sidelines. Li talked about the importance of Japan-China relations, while Kishida called for constructive relations. On Friday, Li met Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. Li Keqiang said China is ready for closer, high-level interactions with Singapore and elevate the bilateral cooperation. Meanwhile, Premier Li met with King Norodom Sihamoni of Cambodia at the Royal Palace in Phnom Penh. Li said China is willing to provide assistance within its capacity to Cambodia in developing its economy and improving people's livelihood. The king said that Cambodia firmly upholds the One China policy principle and supports building a closer Cambodia-China community with a shared future. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Ukraine celebrates recapture of city from Russia. Joe Biden wants a green future but still faces protests. And rice growing is still happening in Hong Kong. Welcome back to TVB News. Ukrainian troops were preparing to enter the southern city of Kherson after Russian forces retreated across the Dnipro River. Officials said the operation was underway to liberate Kherson City, which is the capital of the Kherson region, of which Russia still controls around 70%. Despite Russia's withdrawal, Ukraine's armed forces are wary of landmines and potential traps set by the retreating enemy. Nazvi Karim reports.
The blue and yellow flag of Ukraine flying in Kherson City. A sight unseen since Russia's invasion in February, and a sign of hope for Ukrainians in a key city Moscow claimed to have annexed, but one which they were unable to hold on to. Ukrainians celebrated on the streets after Russia said it had withdrawn all military personnel and equipment from the city east of the Dnipro River. The recapture of Kherson raises hopes that Ukraine is able to make further gains into occupied territory. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said special units of the armed forces had already entered the city, which was the first and only major provincial capital Moscow had taken over completely in the early days of its invasion. Russia's defense ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov said more than 30,000 Russian troops and 5,000 pieces of weapons and military hardware were moved. He added that Ukrainian forces on the right bank of the Dnipro River were coming under heavy fire. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said in a press briefing that Washington would send another $400 million in military aid to Ukraine. Though hailing Ukrainian gains, he said the war was far from over.
The fact of Russian military losses on the battlefield is having an impact on their ability to hold territory in Ukraine. But the larger how long question is not one that I can, put a timetable on, because war is inherently unpredictable.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow continues to consider Kherson as part of Russia, despite the troop withdrawal, and rejected the notion that the retreat is humiliating for President Vladimir Putin. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
U.S. President Joe Biden is set to meet President Xi Jinping during the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia, on Monday, with North Korea on the agenda. Reports said Biden is expected to tell Xi that U.S. military presence in the region will increase if North Korea continues its development of weapons. And the United States is concerned about North Korea resuming nuclear bomb testing for the first time since 2017. Biden believes China and Russia have leverage over Kim Jong-un to persuade him to refrain from more testing. In May, China and Russia vetoed a U.S.-led push for more UN penalties for Pyongyang over its renewed ballistic missile launches. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is attending the annual international summit on climate change, known as COP27, in Egypt. He urged world leaders to double down on their resolve to fight global warming. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, President Biden welcomed back to the world stage, touting the biggest ever U.S. investment in green energy.
We're racing forward to do our part to avert the climate hell that the UN Secretary General so passionately warned about.
And vowing to lead on climate change. The president announcing a new EPA rule to make oil and gas companies find and fix leaks of methane gas, a powerful polluter scientists say traps 80 times more heat than CO2. His speech briefly interrupted by American activists calling for an end to fossil fuels after a report this week shows carbon emissions in the U.S. are on track to hit a new record this year, rising 1.5%, mostly due to air travel. What do we do about it?
The president said from day one that we were back. He didn't say the problem was going to be solved overnight.
The EPA chief promising more regulations to come on cars, trucks, and coal plants. But activists from around the world, including the U.S., say America is not doing enough.
Biden could take this opportunity, if he wants to be the climate president that he says he is, to declare a climate emergency today.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been asked to form a new government by President Isaac Herzog. Netanyahu was indicted 3 years ago on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 long-running cases. But Herzog said he was the favored candidate after he consulted leaders of all parties elected to Israel's parliament last week. Netanyahu had governed Israel for 12 successive years before being ousted by a broad but fragile coalition in 2021. In Britain, food banks are at a breaking point as the cost of living crisis drives a record number of people to seek assistance from food donations.
We regularly have people who come in that may not have eaten for 2-3 days. We didn't used to see that before. I also had a family where one night they fed the son, the next night they fed the daughter because they can't feed everyone. I just think it's shameful that we're in a relatively wealthy city, that we have people that are struggling so much.
Food prices in Britain are soaring at an alarming rate, which has strained many elderly people's limited pension. The Consumer Price Index in the UK jumped to a record annual rate of 10.1% in September. Now, not just the low-income group, more middle-class people in London are also turning to food banks for help. This morning, the mainland successfully launched the Tianzhou 5 cargo spacecraft off the island of Hainan, and a new world record was set in the process.
3、2、1，点火！点火！
The event took place at 10:30 this morning at the Wenchang spacecraft launch site. Carried by the Long March 7 Y6 rocket, the cargo spacecraft delivered supplies as well as experiment equipment for the Shenzhou 15 crew. Tianzhou 5 docked with the Tiangong space station in just 2 hours from its launch in Hainan, establishing a new world record. Hong Kong has very little agriculture, but there is a movement to revitalize local rice farming. Conservationists and farmers have been trying hard to find success. Michael Wong reports.
Hong Kong is now widely known as a highly urbanized city with very little agriculture. But rice cultivation was once a flourishing trade.
We believe that the cultivation probably starts in the Song Dynasty when there's a lot of immigrants from the middle part of China to Hong Kong.
Professor Lam Hong Ming says that after the 80s, the city's rice fields nearly disappeared. Recently, the government has launched a plan to bring back rice farming.
The aim of this is to improve the quality of the local crop varieties as well as the income of the farmers.
Since 2020, Nick Learn and his partner have run an aquaponics trial program near Tai Mo Shan.
It's easier to compare the value of rice and liquor, and it's easier to share wine than rice. How many people can share a bowl of rice? But if we use it to make wine, there will be a little more market reaction.
He says anyone who wants to bring back agriculture must first consider the commercial value in doing so.
We're not trying to live a hard life or do agricultural tourism or combine some blind support or other emotions to do business. We hope that our aquaponics model will let everyone see the value of agricultural products. If it is worth $30, we sell it at $30. Hong Kong agriculture can make money.
Michael Wong, TVB News.
During the lengthy COVID pandemic, many children have been deprived of occasions of joy. A Hong Kong charity has made throwing birthday parties its mission as a way to help disadvantaged children. Our Jackie Lin got an invitation to the special party.
This is not your regular birthday party, but for these children who would not otherwise have an opportunity to celebrate their special day with people they don't encounter in everyday life. Birthday Happiness Asia throws around 4 such parties a month.
I'm so happy! I have a teddy bear and I can see my friends to eat a cake.
The nonprofit also engages a community of English-speaking professionals and international students.
I'm from the Caribbean, and coming here in Hong Kong and having to volunteer helped me engage in the community. And I also love how the kids felt, even how happy they were when we were giving them the gifts. For example, we had to close their eyes and hide them, and when we opened, they were so happy.
Before COVID, they were just maybe alone at home, like mostly. But right now, they have a lot of other children with them and play a lot of games.
Are you guys ready?
As a group specializing in throwing birthday bashes, it does know a thing or two about adding a little pizzazz to parties.
For those who forgot to dress up for the party's Halloween theme this time, like me, fret not. Birthday Happiness Asia literally got you covered with various costumes here to complete your spooky look.
And this is the man behind the cause, Edward Fernandez.
Great fun. It's unbelievable. Maybe because I'm a child at heart, I enjoy it even more. I'm not quite sure who has the more fun, the children or me. It's a close call.
The Kenyan-born British national of Goan Indian descent founded BHA in Hong Kong back in the 90s with his Filipino wife, Mary Lou. Before the organization kicked back into high gear, BHA went into a year-long hiatus when Edward's late wife battled with cancer.
It is for her. And for her, because like me, she loved Hong Kong.
Hong Kong, a place the 65-year-old has called home for nearly 30 years.
Over 300,000 less fortunate children in Hong Kong. I'm not going to reach all of them. 1%, that's better than nothing.
so that these kids will experience the birthday joy that he and his wife missed out on in their childhoods.
We never had a birthday party. That's why our children always had birthday parties. Even if we went without food for a week, why not other children? They deserve it just as much as our children. A good memory, a good memory.
Making memories he hopes can last a lifetime, one party at a time. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.